All right, students, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. So, sorry for the great delay in getting this course underway. Welcome to sixth grade religious education. So today and through the rest of this class, we will be looking at both the Old Testament and the early church. So you spent the last few years, each year has kind of had its own unique angle on the subject of our Catholic faith. In third grade, for example, you focused very hard on the Apostles' Creed and the parable of the mustard seed. Next year, there was some more focus on the Ten Commandments. This year, we're going to be focusing on very much the Old Testament and on the early days of the Catholic Church. Seventh grade, you're going to talk about the rest of church history, and eighth grade will be almost exclusively preparation for confirmation. So without any further ado, now we're going to skip over the icebreaker, mostly because, one, it's very late in the year, and two, because we're not meeting in person. So ordinarily we do an icebreaker, but let's get into the main thick of it. So the first thing we got to talk about before we even delve into the Old Testament, before we even delve into anything else, is a major part of our religious studies this year is going to concern the Bible. So first we got to talk about what is the Bible exactly? What is it useful for? And just how old is it precisely? So what is the Bible per se? And what the Bible is it is the divinely inspired writings. Now, this is a collection of 73 sacred books, 45 of which we as Catholics call the Old Testament, 28 of which we call the New Testament. And these are held to be religiously true documents. And what that means is the purpose of these books is to convey religious truth. Now, what do you use a Bible for precisely? Well, its main use is as a collection of religious documents. So its primary purpose, the primary function of a Bible, is to help us better understand God, our relationship to God, our role in religion. That's what the Bible really exists to teach us. Now, some biblical books are useful as historical sources. For example, the Book of Kings or the books of Kings, are useful as historical sources on ancient Israel. And there's a great deal of historical information that can be learned from the Gospels, especially concerning the life of Jesus and that particular period of Israel's history, as well as in the Acts of the Apostles. However, due to its great antiquity, the Bible is really not a reliable source of scientific data. So you may see references in the Bible to things that are definitely not 100% scientific, right? You'll hear references to the sun rotating around the earth. That's you're not obligated to take that as literally true or anything like that. So don't feel as if that's something you necessarily have to do. You'll also see an absence of mentions of things that maybe would appear in a science textbook. So it's okay. It doesn't mean the Bible isn't true because it isn't mentioning things. It's just that it's not meant as a scientific document. It's meant as a religious document. So how old is the Bible exactly? Well, the answer to that is actually kind of a complex one. You see, the oldest part of the Bible, the oldest piece of writing that has made it into the Bible, is the Canticle of Deborah, the Song of Deborah, which is found in the book of Judges, chapter 5. And as best as we can tell, this portion of the Bible, this particular poem, this particular song, was written circa 1280 BC. So that's 1,280 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. The most modern portion of the Bible is either the book of Jude or the book of Revelation, both of which were composed sometime around the year 120 AD. That means there is a total of 1,400 years that it took to put the Bible together, right? If we go from the oldest piece of writing to find its way into the Holy Scriptures to the most modern piece to find its way into the Holy Scriptures, you're talking about a 1,400-year gap. So, of course, you're going to find elements of the Bible that maybe don't always seem to jive 100% with each other. Of course, it's going to appear a little haphazard in places. It took 1,400 years to put the Bible together. The other thing that's important to understand here is the great age of the book we're dealing with. Remember, the newest portion of the Bible was written in 120 AD, right? That's, basically 1,880 years ago. And that's the newest portion of the Scriptures. And then there's another 1,400 years on top of that, if you're going all the way back to the oldest part of the Scriptures. Now, the reason I bring this up is, before we delve right into it, is think about how old of a document we're talking about. This is not, for many of you, I'm sure the oldest document you're accustomed to dealing with is maybe something like the Declaration of Independence. Very old document, to be sure. But that was published in 1776. That's only a little more than 220 years ago. That's, or 240 years ago. That's old. But that's fairly cutting edge compared to even the newest part of the Bible. And this brings us into an important subject we have to broach, which is the magisterium. So due to the age of the Bible, it's often made difficult to interpret, right? The way people express things in terms of human language changes from generation to generation. And furthermore, we're also dealing with a document that was not originally written in the English language. So the oldest portions of the Bible, the Old Testament, most of the books of the Old Testament were written in Hebrew, with a few select being written in Greek, and the rest of the books of the New Testament originally being written in Greek. So what most of us have in our homes, assuming none of you speak Hebrew or Greek, is an English translation of texts that were originally Greek or Hebrew. So to help avoid misinterpretations, God has granted to the magisterium, that is to say the popes and the bishops, the authority to give official interpretations of the Scriptures. This is why we as Catholics have the magisterium, because every so often you'll hear, especially from our Protestant brothers and sisters, well, why do you have to listen to the Pope's interpretation on the Bible? Why don't you just read it for yourself? Why don't you just think for yourself? It's not that we're not thinking for ourselves. What it is that what you're looking at is, this is an incredibly ancient document that we're dealing with. And so if you want an ancient document translated and you want to translate it correctly, you're going to want to confer with an expert. So this is why we allow the learned men of the church, the Pope, the bishops, all of these men have studied lengthy amounts of both the languages we're dealing with, Hebrew and Greek, as well as Latin, which many older translations of the Bible were written in as well. Not to mention the knowledge of sacred theology. That's the study of religion. And so they're in a better position to be able to make sense of some of the finer points of the Bible and to produce an accurate English translation. So that is the magisterium. That's why we as Catholics have the magisterium. So that has been what would typically be the intro class. So attached in the folder, attached to the email that came with this particular post, you will find a guided notes version of this that you should have been filling out alongside the rest of this lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to go back to the original recording. Also, feel free to consult with the guide, with the textbook that comes with this course from Sadlier. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm sorry once again for how late it took us to get this out. Thank you so much, and more updates will follow shortly.